no, Hello again, it's me. Today, we're going to talk about regular versus irregular verbs. Now, if you remember, as you should, because we've talked about these a lot, verbs are really important words in English. And verbs have a couple of really important jobs in sentences. Remember that you cannot even make a sentence without a verb. And verbs could be action verbs or being verbs. And verbs also help to tell us time in a sentence. And when we talk about that idea of a verb telling us time, then we're talking about tense. And last time I was talking to you, we were talking about the simple past tense. And if you remember, in talking about the simple past tense, I told you that the simple past tense helps us to identify two other ways that we can talk about verbs. That's regular verbs and irregular verbs. And here's the thing, I mean, irregular verbs, they're probably some of the most frustrating words in English. There's no rules. Because remember, regular verbs, they follow a really simple rule. In the simple past tense, a regular verb will always end with these two letters, ed. Always. No exceptions. Because if the verb does not end in ed in the simple past tense, it can't be regular. All of the verbs that do not end in ed in the simple past tense are irregular verbs. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. And even worse, the words on the board, the verbs in black, don't even make up close to all of the irregular verbs in English. Some of the most common verbs in English are irregular. And I can't just tell you a nice, easy rule to help you identify or remember how irregular verbs look in the simple past tense. These are words you just have to know, and you just have to remember. And I'm going to try and help you remember some of the more common ones today. So, the words in black, in the two boxes, these are called the bare infinitive form of the verb. Now, I know that sounds really difficult and fancy, but it really just means the word you would look up in a dictionary. So, if you were to look up this word in a dictionary, you would find out that this word, write, means, to put letters onto paper or letters onto a board, and that's the verb to write. Now, if I want to talk about something that I did in the past, like maybe I wrote all of these words a few minutes ago on the board, that's the way I have to do it. This word write becomes wrote. And this word, if you want to tell your friends how you read some words on the board after watching this video, you wouldn't say, I read words on the board. I mean, that's what you're doing right now. You would say, I read words on the board. And you see, here, you can't even read the difference. It's all in how it sounds. And this one, ride, I ride a bus to work almost every day. So that means yesterday, I certainly rode a bus to work. And maybe you saw this video before. Maybe this is your second time. Maybe you see this video often and you saw it just yesterday. And maybe you run to school, or maybe you ran to school 3 weeks ago and hurt your knee. I don't know. But you see, all of these words, there's just no way that I can give you a pattern. I mean, I hope you slept well last night, and I hope you ate all of your food, and I can't go through all of these. What do you want from me? We're still rolling. This is what you need to know. Regular verbs end in ed in the simple past tense. All the rest are irregular. Let's review.
Regular versus irregular verbs. Why are verbs important words in English? Verbs are important because we can't make a sentence without a verb. What are the two kinds of verbs? The two kinds of verbs are action verbs and being verbs. What do verbs help tell us in a sentence? Verbs help tell us the time in a sentence. Which verb tense helps us identify regular verbs and irregular verbs? The simple past tense helps us to identify regular verbs and irregular verbs. What is the ending for regular verbs in the simple past tense? The ending for regular verbs in the simple past tense is ed or ied. How can we figure out the ending for irregular verbs? We just have to memorize them. There is no rule or pattern for the endings of irregular verbs in the simple past tense.